People who quit their jobs on the first day, what was your I'm outta here moment? Not technically first day but second day. When I was 20 or so I got hired to be a temporary floor member for Forever 21 during the holiday season. My training started a week before Black Friday, so the store was already kind of in chaos. On my first day of training I walked in and the floor manager gave all the new hires a tour showing us the facility and layout of the store. After this I was assigned to a veteran floor member to shadow and get an idea of what my job was and what my duties would be. As soon as I was assigned, the manager dipped, never to be seen again. An hour and a half into my shift, my shadowy got an emergency family call and had to take off for a week. When this happened I found some other floor manager and explained the situation and asked them who else I should shadow. The manager's response was, just do what you can by yourself, you'll be fine, everyone else is busy. Figured, well, okay, I'll try. I don't know if any of you have shopped in the women's section of Forever 21, but during seasonal sales they will have multiple articles of clothing that all look almost exactly the same but with slight differences. A white cardigan with 4 buttons that looked literally the same as a white cardigan with 5 buttons. The best part was these different items were often placed in completely separate parts of the store, and it was the job of the dressing room to return the unpurchased items to the correct section so the employees could put them back on the shelves. Well, these employees fucking sucked, and I didn't know if they were a part of my section or not, so I'd spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to find where they go before realizing, wait, this isn't even my section, I've checked literally every rack, so I'd put it back on the sorting rack and move to the next item. More than 50% of the stuff I was told to reshelf wasn't my section. I just did as best as I could and got ready for my next miserable day. Fuck Forever 21. Legit the worst job I had. When I was hired they explained that we had to wear fashionable clothing, and no sneakers/comfortable shoes were permitted. I asked what they expected me to wear on concrete for 10-hour shifts, and the manager legit said heels, flats, sandals, or boots. Heels preferred. I wore combat boots or flats and still got wicked blisters. They never taught me which clothes go where, so it was just guesswork based off the tag or if it looked similar on the rack. When I asked if anyone could train me on where things go I was laughed at. They said to come back and shop on my free time to learn it. How weird that this is the same logic they gave you. The worst was it took us hours to close the store. I'm talking about the mall closed at 9 p.m. and I sometimes wouldn't get home until 3 a.m. the next day, because if you were done with your section you had to wait until everyone else in the store was done. I'd be finished and forced to go help the people who goofed off all day. They also made us clock out before midnight and then clock back in at 12:01, so they didn't pay overtime. I was too stupid to realize that I was being taken advantage of. The last straw was I found out my mom had a cancer scare and I had to go to the hospital to see her. When I told the manager, she said she won't die in the next 8 hours, you can deal with her in your own time. Deal with her, like she was a parasite or something. I legit told her to go fuck herself and threw my lanyard at her and stomped out. I never shopped there again. I was a cashier at Lowe's during college for less than a full day. I made it through the multiple day training, but there was so much stupid shit going on I almost thought I was on a hidden camera show. All of the employees complained about how hard they had to work while simultaneously not getting enough hours. Nobody understood why they were hiring like 4 new people. I was one of those 4. Turns out it's because they were progressing through a sexual harassment complaint that required restructuring of the store and firing of some employees. This was known to HR and explained to new hires, against company policy, but wasn't known to the employees, apparently some of whom still worked there, including the fucking person doing the training. She was really inappropriate and said not to worry about the sexual harassment stuff, that everything would go back to normal soon enough and we wouldn't have to be so uptight. They fired her the day before I started, along with one of the cashiers who trained me. She also offered me terrible guidance for the application process. They were looking for part-time help and 2 of the 3 days they needed help on I had off from school. I told them I could work nights most nights, but if they needed daytime help it had to be on those days. She said if I was too restrictive they wouldn't keep me on, lied to my boss about my availability to make me even more attractive than I already was wink, and told me to schmooze them a bit and I'd make it further. She said in the end it wouldn't impact anything, and I'd get those days. My first ever job. I was 13 and I would be delivering phone books from the back of a van through people's letterboxes. So I'd be in the back of the van with the phone books and there was an older guy driving slowly while I went back and forth to the van/houses with the books. At one point the van was getting quite empty so there was more space to move around and we had finished the delivery in the street we were paid to deliver to and he drove to another. While driving there he drove let's say aggressively and I fell inside the back where the books were. I wasn't sitting in a seat as the van had no seats in the back. As I put my hand out to steady myself I accidentally laid it across a portable radio that had its antenna extended but the antenna was also broken halfway and razor sharp. It sliced the palm of my hand clean open 3 to 4 inches. I can only describe what I saw as gruesome. I said to him to pull the van over and I needed help. He saw my hand and just threw me a plastic bag, the kind you'd get at a supermarket, and told me to wrap my hand in it. Then he continued with the deliveries, at least he delivered the remaining books himself. I should have been taken to a hospital or at least home to my parents. I quit after that and never showed up again. As you can imagine my parents were quite angry at him. A long time ago, not long after getting my papers as a chef I had an interview at a hotel for a position in the kitchen. The executive chef and I chatted in his office for about 20 minutes. At the time I remember him coming off as very arrogant, which is quite common in this field. I didn't think much of it at the time as the pay was decent and the shift was what I wanted. As I was leaving his office I turned to leave through the dining room, the way I had come in, which was closed at the time. It was another hour or so before service started and he says to me, "No, not that way, go through the kitchen, you're not good enough to go through the dining room." I was so surprised by what he said, I just did what he asked without a word. Later on after I had got home I phoned him up and said that after having a close look I decided that his menu wasn't good enough and that I wouldn't be accepting his offer. I got hired at a very small knockoff dollar store in an old, failing mall. The owner was foreign with a very thick accent. He told me I'd get $6 an hour but neglected to mention it was under the table. I spent about an hour stocking the very overly cluttered shelves before I was told to get more chips out of the back storage area. I walk back there and there's about a dozen men sitting on boxes all crammed into a small back room. I asked where the chips were and these guys all glared at me. They started speaking in another language and rapidly motioned towards me. Then one guy got up and asked what I needed. I told him I was supposed to get a box of chips and he got a box out of the pile and handed it to me. The entire time these guys are all staring at me. Everything back there looked shady as all hell and it was very uncomfortable. A while later I had to use the restroom which was also in the back. These guys all just wordlessly glared at me while I went into the woman's restroom. While I was in the restroom, someone tried to open the door. I was the only woman there. The owner told me he wanted me to come back that night late in the evening well after the mall closed. I didn't show up. I came in the next morning and lied about why I couldn't work there. He still gave me the few bucks from what little time I did work. I don't know what in the hell that guy had going on there and I didn't want to find out. Edit, forgot to add in the best part. I was 18 and this was supposed to have been my first job. Applied for a job at my longtime favorite restaurant, celebrated my birthday there every year. Owner asks me to come in for basically a tryout, as I communicated I was looking at other job possibilities. I come in and they just stick me on dishwashing for an hour, no biggie. Then their dishwasher doesn't show up, so the kitchen manager asks me to stay one for their lunch rush, so yeah, I'll get paid for the hours. I do. Kitchen staff was nice so I was happy to help out even though I figured I'd be taking a different job. I fill out a time card at the end of the shift and tell the manager I probably wouldn't be back. He understands and thanks me for the help. Fast forward a couple weeks and he tells me to email the owner after I ask him if I should pick up my measly paycheck. I do. She basically tells me to fuck off over text. Tells me it was staging and that she told me I wouldn't be paid. I respond that I understand that, but that I stayed an extra 3 hours which I was told I'd be paid for. She stops responding. I decide I want to be petty over the $40, so I get the stat labor department involved. Dude goes in there and makes her pay me for the hours including the first staging hour. Couple weeks later I got my $40, never went back to that restaurant. Edit. Firstly, petty is not how I see it 2 years later. I'm very glad I did this, and sharing the story with others in my city I learned this practice was very common with local restaurants. Hopefully others learn to stand up for their labor too from my small experience. Secondly, this restaurant closed down a couple weeks after I got that paycheck. The owner made a long-winded complaint on the FB page about how the food culture had changed in the city and her restaurant didn't fit in anymore. Total bullshit, they were always popular. Most people theorized the terrible mismanagement and employee abuse had caught up to her. I was a waitress, the only waitress, at a just-opened diner. The boss didn't have me sign any paperwork. Everything was under the table. But that wasn't what made me quit at the end of the night. In order to get me where he wanted me to go, he would pinch my skirt at my upper thigh, not quite the butt but very close, and pull me around like it was a leash. Needed me in the kitchen? Rather than call me. He would come out, pinch my skirt and pull to the kitchen. Needed me at the cash machine? Again, come over to wherever I was, didn't matter if I was serving a customer, and would grab my skirt to pull me. That act in itself made some customers uncomfortable. Mind you, one couple left an almost 50% tip in the end. But I think it was more out of pity and embarrassment on my behalf. I was supposed to come in the next day, but I called that night and said the job wasn't for me. I came in a couple days later to turn in my apron and he just took a wad of cash out of his pocket and paid me then and there. God, he was creepy. I think it was a smart move to quit. I got suckered into doing that when I was 17, naive, and desperate for a job. Biggest bunch of scumbags I ever met. The guy driving the van had some kind of relationship with the girl sitting shotgun and they were arguing, loudly, and she just straight up jumped out of the van while it was moving. His, and everyone else's reaction, was we should get out of here. They wanted to just ditch this poor girl in a fucking random suburb an hour and a half from the city we drove out of. The only reason they picked her up is I swore to God and heaven above I would give everyone's names and addresses to the police. A few of them had paper out, so they didn't like that. I had been working there for like 2 weeks at this point, but didn't go back after getting home that evening. Reprehensible garbage. Actually a pretty decent product, though. The not getting told how to something then getting told off for doing it wrong thing happened to me. I was so mad. Got told to put something on shelves by checkout. Asked if there's any specific way it needs to be done. Get told no, idiot, it's not hard, you just put as much as you can fit on the shelf. Stack stuff on shelf. Why didn't you follow protocol around displaying stuff here? You have to count exactly how many you use for stock control and display them a certain way. Thought that one was a one-off, but the next day I ask what I should be doing after a busy period. There's nothing to do for a bit. Make us all coffee to practice using the machine. Halfway through making coffee, why haven't you done really important job? You don't have time to be taking coffee breaks. This was my trainer vs the manager. Turns out the trainer didn't want someone else working with her, so she sabotaged me and set me up for the manager to catch me doing the wrong things she'd told me to do. I told them they clearly have some issues to work out among themselves and quit. Yeah, red flag, if it's not a volunteer position, such as at a charity store or an animal shelter, and they ask you to work for free? It's never worth it. Edit. I am aware unpaid work is often illegal in certain countries and states of America. Other countries have different laws around unpaid work, and people can still be taken advantage of in countries where it is illegal, especially people that desperately need work, youth, immigrants, uneducated, and neurodivergent people. The reason some people take unpaid work is because they are often promised a paid position after a trial period, or need the work experience for their resumes. Just because you think it's a stupid thing to do, doesn't mean others in a different boat will see it as one. This is why all teenagers should be taught the difference between unpaid work, which is healthy, and unhealthy/illegal. Volunteering is almost always the only good example of unpaid work I can think of, but only if it is only a few hours a week and it's nothing too intensive/stressful. My first day working at EB Games. I was super excited to be there. The first half of my shift was basically tidy up the shelves. It was a high traffic location, so the shelves always need tidying. After 5 hours of following kids around and putting things away, I go on break. When I come back, my manager is standing in his strangely empty store, absolutely aghast, staring at a huge steaming pile of shit on the carpeted floor. Apparently a homeless person had walked in. Without saying a single word, he dropped through and emptied his bowls. My boss at me and says, "Oh good, you're back. Just in time. Clean that up, I'm going for lunch." I laughed at him and told him, "You can't be serious. I'm not going near that." He responds with, "It's your job, I'm taking a break. I want it gone before I get back." I told he's going to have to deal with it on his own because I don't need this job that bad. So I quit. I grabbed my coat and went home. 1 week later, the district manager calls me up to apologize and offer me my job back. I have worked in construction type jobs my whole life. The amount of angry, abusive assholes you encounter are endless. This one dickhead still has the title. This was in the 90s, so he has stood the test of time. A friend quit this job and gave my number to his asshole boss he had, without my knowledge. I never did thank him for that. This guy calls me out of the blue and asks if I need work. I said I did. He said he could pick me up the next morning. I said I have my own car, I could meet him on site. He yells and says he will pick me up. I was floored that this idiot was yelling at me 2 minutes after talking to me. I gave him my address and he said he would be there at 6:30 the next morning. At 5:30 the next morning, this asshole is calling asking, "Where the fuck is your house?" No hello, no good morning, just full on screaming. I said if he would stop yelling I would give him directions. He starts yelling again, so I hang up. He calls right back and is losing it because I hung up on him. I tell him to fuck off and not even bother to show up. The 2 other guys I lived with were now awake and not too happy with me. I explain what happened and they just go back to bed. About 30 minutes later, I am awakened by the sound of a horn blaring outside our house. We lived on a farm, so luckily the next neighbor was half a mile away. My roommates once again wake up and they are livid. We all go outside and this asshole is yelling at us to get in the truck because we're late. He's there a half an hour earlier than he said he would be. He also doesn't know who is who because he just spoke to me on the phone. I'm about to tell him to fuck off again, but my buddy walks up to the truck and says he wants to get paid up front. This guy lets loose a tirade on my buddy. My buddy just laughs in his face. He says if you're going to be an asshole, he will have to pay him first. The guy just keeps yelling. My buddy says he will be out in a minute and he better have his money ready. We all go back in the house and watch this guy wait in his truck. He's there about 5 minutes and starts blowing the horn. We just laugh and poke our head out the door and say we'll be there in a minute. He keeps blowing the horn. We just ignore him. After another 10 minutes he bangs on the door. I open the door and this fool is about 5 feet 2 inches and maybe 200 pounds. I am shocked by his appearance. He's just about to say something and I say, "Didn't I tell you to fuck off and not bother coming here?" He is truly confused. He asked where's the other guy? I said he was just fucking with you. I'm the guy you were talking to, now fuck off. He says, so you're going to fuck me up and not come to work. I was amazed what an asshole this guy was. I said you got to pay me up front first. He starts yelling and swearing again. I slam the door in his face. He starts banging on the door like a madman. I finally have enough and get a hockey stick and chase him back to his truck. It was pretty funny watching him run. He backs out of the driveway and threatens he'll get me for this. He still is the biggest asshole I have ever met. Had 2 interviews to work housekeeping at a hospital. Got a call the night of the second interview at around midnight from the guy saying I was just so excited I wanted to call and tell you I'm gonna call you to offer you the job tomorrow. Should have taken that as the first red flag, but I needed the job. I go in for my first day of training and he has printouts of my Facebook wall and my boyfriend's. He started asking me how long we had been together and made it clear he knew everything so not to lie to him. It was so uncomfortable. I leave his office and do some training. We break for lunch and he sits with me in the cafeteria asking how it's been going so far, etc. Then tells me he expects to see me at his church Sunday. I haven't gone to church in like 10 years at this point. We all have a quick meeting in our main room and I stay back after everyone had left. I put my badge, keys, and walkie on the desk and walk the fuck out. I felt bad, but it was no wonder why they can't keep anyone. He called me for months afterwards asking what had happened. He was worried sick, he deserves answers, blah blah blah. I had called their HR the day after I had walked out to tell them I quit and why, so they had to have told him. He had no reason to keep contacting me. Edit, thought I'd give a smidgen of more info in case anyone was worried still.